Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Phil, and I'm one of the business relations officer of Chicago DealVault. So allow me to start the webinar today and introduce our guest speaker. He is a frequent lecturer at numerous real estate investor seminars, and he represents hundreds of property investors and represents a wide variety of businesses and contractors and corporate affairs. So his experience in assisting clients with building wealth and asset protection has earned him a reputation as a must for any serious investor. He is also the preferred attorney of Chicago DealVault and Home First Realty, Hugo's brokerage. So friends, I'm glad we have today attorney Gary Davidson.
Hey, thanks so much, Phil. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about hidden real estate gems in the, well, I guess we have to name this during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think perhaps when Hugo was advertising this, we were advertising it as a post-COVID pandemic, but it appears as though we're still in the midst of it now with the Omicron. So just real quick, most of you may know me. My name is Gary Davidson. I own a company called CASHFLOW. We're actually the largest real estate investment law firm in the state of Illinois. We represent a lot of municipalities, publicly held companies, hedge funds, private equity groups. I've got one of my attorneys, Brian Krause, also with me tonight. He may spend a few minutes on evictions after I get done talking about some opportunities given the inflation market that we're in and COVID. And I also wanted to just do a quick special shout out to one of my close personal friends and mentors and someone who I do a tremendous amount of business with. And I'm going to have him just say a few words because I see that he's on, and I think that it's important for all of you to know Frank Montrow. So Frank is the #1 real estate investment agent for investors in the state. He's consistently ranked in among the top real estate brokers by both transaction volume and, more importantly, on a statistic that you can't really measure, which is providing and adding value and connecting people. So Frank, I see you have your microphone on, so I know you have to get to another meeting, but just say hi real quick before I get into my little spiel here.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for the kind words. Hi, everybody. Frank Montrow. I'm with Keller Williams. I've been in the business for 39 years. I don't know if you can see my, I don't want to disconnect anything. I don't think my thing is on, but you can hear me anyways, I hope. Yes? Can you guys hear me? Or?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. So, yeah, basically what I do in a nutshell is I focus on finding off-market properties for investors, connecting them with contractors, with hard money, and also helping them with an exit strategy if they need that. But that's, you know, if I were to give you a quick 30-second elevator speech, that's primarily what I do. I get off-market inventory every day. I do, you know, they do call me the king of the South Side, but because I do so much volume down there, but that's because there's more volume there than anywhere else. You know, we are all over the place. I mean, I got a property in Lincoln Square tonight, a 2-flat. It just came over to me, and so we're north, south, east, west, surrounding perimeter suburbs. We do go up. We're out in Schaumburg, Northbrook, Skokie, all over there. We're doing it out west, Bellwood, Maywood, Joliet, the whole parameter down south, Olympia Fields, Lansing, South Holland, Tinley Park, Orland Park, you know, and so forth. So you get the ideas. We're pretty spread out. You know, my team does about 350 flips a year. We're constantly on growth mode. So this is, in fact, I'm meeting and an investor right now. I'm going to meet with him, and he buys way up north by the border. So we're moving, we're expanding out in that direction as well too. But if you desire to have a conversation with me, and or you want to hire me, and or you just have a general question, I love helping people, and I'd be more than happy to help if I can. My phone number is 708-307-0777. A lot of sevens in there. 708-307-0777. Yeah, I mean, like, feel free to reach out to me. I do. I'm usually very difficult to reach, and I've been on a speaking marathon lately, so I'm gonna have to this weekend. I'll have to catch up. If you want to reach me, you can reach me anytime from 4:30 to 7 o'clock a.m., not p.m. And yes, you did hear me correctly. 4:30 to 7 a.m. That's the best time to reach me. So I'm up early. Feel free to call me. Glad to help any way that I can. I may not be able to, if you have a question that requires research, it may, I may take me a week to get back to you. So be patient. If it's a simple, simple answer that I can provide, I can, get that to you right away. But be glad to help you. Thanks again, Gary, for the intro, and everybody have a phenomenal 2022. And you're in the right place. You're talking to my personal attorney, as well as he's the attorney to the investors. I mean, he's the. We got to come up with Gary. You got to come up with a slogan. But you're the you deal with more investors than any other attorney that I know. The reason why he's my attorney is because he brings me value. So he connects me to a lot of people, and he saves me money, and just a wealth of knowledge too. Those are the kind of people I hang out with. So that's why I deal with Gary. So Gary, thank you. I'm gonna let you get back to your thing. Thanks for squeezing me in. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Thanks, Frank. So guys,
Thanks.
Frank is there's a network of people that are kind of at the top of the industry. Ryan Smith, who's the #1 REO broker, Frank. We all work together, and you guys are now part of that inner circle because we believe in DealVault and Hugo. So let's just talk about some opportunities during COVID. One of the things that we're focused on right now as a result of the pandemic and everything that's going on in the economy is inflation. And inflation is a very common phenomenon in most economies. In fact, it's often seen as an early sign of the end of an economic cycle. So we've experienced some tremendous growth. We've seen for investors a very, very difficult time finding assets that perform because of the massive increase in the amount in pricing. And of course, pricing is increased because there's a limited amount of supply. And when you have low interest rates and limited supply, it by definition causes inflation and causes price to increase. And of course, COVID has only further contributed to that. I mean, we were going to have inflation, but COVID's further contributed to that because, of course, for 2 years, banks couldn't foreclose. So many of my clients who are banks and my hedge funds and private equity groups, they couldn't foreclose on assets because of the mandates that Pritzker and other governors imposed. So through governmental controls, it's caused this runaway pricing. So naturally, this sudden spike in inflation has a seismic impact on a wide range of sectors and investment portfolios, and investors who fail to navigate this phenomenon and understand inflation are invariably going to be wiped out. And I say that in a very sort of cavalier sort of way, but I talk to clients all the time, and they say, I need to purchase this for $100,000 in order to win the bid. Well, let's define what win is. What is Warren Buffett doing right now? Is Warren Buffett acquiring a ton of assets, or is he waiting for the economy to fall? So just because you have to pay $100,000 doesn't mean that you should, because winning is defined as a property cash flowing or predicting what's going to happen in the future. And if we're going to have a 20% market correction due to the pending millions of properties that are going to come out of the market due to the foreclosures beginning, how does that impact our flips? So how does real estate investing fare against inflation? What happens to real estate investing during inflation? And is inflation good for real estate? So before we kind of dive into these questions that I'm raising, we kind of first have to define what inflation is, right? In simple terms, it's an increase in the price of goods and services over a certain period of time. So lumber, we all hear about the prices of lumber, the prices of all of these various things, a gallon of milk, all of these things. The cost of goods has dramatically increased because the cost of product has increased, and that has caused inflation. There's several reasons that inflation occur in a particular market. The main one is excess demand and various cost push factors. Spike in the demand for certain products and services. So we all know about the toilet paper run when the first version of coronavirus was around. Increase in wages, production expenses, cost of raw materials, lumber, right? When we're doing our flips, the cost of putting, my wife's looking to put a brand new, Epic Beverly Hills deck on the back of our house, and that cost is massively high. So the cost of raw goods leads to high inflation. So now that we understand what inflation is, let's examine how it affects the real estate market. So like I mentioned, inflation has a very sizable impact on a myriad of sectors of our economy. The most affected ones are usually financial and the energy markets, but real estate investors rarely actually feel the brunt of inflation, because real estate, or the investment in hard physical assets, is actually a good hedge against inflation. So if you look at your stock portfolios, you look at your 401k plan, those are dramatically impacted by inflation, but real estate actually can be a very tremendously good hedge. I always tell my clients, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Everyone gets very excited about this real estate. They want to, put all of their 401k into self-directed IRA and put everything into real estate. We always need to stay diversified. Even me being a real estate attorney, me being very, very bullish on real estate, I've got a very, very sizable percentage of my net worth in the stock market. But let's look at how the housing market reacts to rising prices and what makes real estate investing such a good inflation-proof asset, okay? Well, what happens to real estate values in inflation? Property values increase. As you would expect, they increase even more when high inflation rates hit the economy. The reasons for this are quite obvious and simple. If prices of construction materials are high, developers spend more money when building new properties. So when developers are spending more money building new properties, the new housing market cost of new construction costs more. So there allows for the opportunity for those of us who are small time investors to have an opportunity to buy small assets and be able to buy a house in Evergreen Park or Sauk Village or Dolton or Cicero or Berwyn or wherever, and that cost for that home is going to be less than the cost for a new construction house. But because new construction costs so much more to build and therefore the prices are higher, existing property values will also rise, which then it becomes, again, inflation proof or at least retardant, because your property values are going to rise due to the reduced supply of new constructions. Cost of borrowing will be generally higher. So generally speaking, in an economy that's experiencing rising prices, it's not conducive to getting favorable loan terms. However, what do we all know? The Federal Reserve controls the interest rates. So Donald Trump's only opportunity to get reelected was based on the economy. Anybody, regardless of what anybody thinks and your political opinion, and everybody gets all righteously indignant, I personally still feel like politics has to be a conversation that's on the table. You have to be mature about having conversations about politics because they impact the world and they impact the business decisions we make. I'm old enough to remember, geez, it was nice when you could watch Crossfire and you could listen to Pat Buchanan and Robert Novak and the other guys that were on there, and two people could have civil conversations. But now there's all this vitriol. Whatever you think about the guy, the economy was great during Donald Trump. Whether it was because of Donald Trump or not because of Donald Trump is irrelevant. But he was keeping the interest rates low because he knew that was his only chance to get reelected. He was a jerk in other ways. Biden's still trying to keep those interest rates low because he's trying to keep that economy trumming along. Even though interest rates should be increasing, the government has control over that, and they're keeping it arbitrarily low. So that's very, very good for investors. So generally speaking, during inflation, the cost of borrowing tends to actually be quite high in these situations. Because inflation devalues currency, right? So it forces most lenders to raise interest rates. This is usually done in an effort to cover their losses that endanger that deflation in the value of currency. So it's worth noting that higher cost for interest affects both buyers of real estate, and it also affects real estate developers because they have to borrow the money. So again, that increases the cost of new construction, which puts you in an opportunity as investors. As a matter of fact, obviously most construction companies rely on loans to tackle their projects. And with any increase in interest rates, that will invariably result in higher property prices. So very, very unusual because we have this hyperinflation going on, yet interest rates are very, very low. So that helps us as real estate investors be able to buy properties and have them perform. Because even though, like, I'm a predictor, Frank's very bullish, the guy that was on the top real estate agent in Illinois for investors. Frank's very, very bullish, thinks that the real estate market in Illinois, it's going to run right through any sort of crash. If you talk to Ryan Smith, who's the #1 REO agent, a very good friend of mine, and myself, he and I are a little bit more pessimistic. I'm predicting like a 20% market correction. But if you're buying rental properties, it really doesn't matter if there's a market crash. My sister who just moved to South Carolina, she was bragging about the fact that, oh man, I bought this house in South Carolina and it's up 30% in value. And I said, it's kind of like my stock portfolio. I'm 48 years old. I'm not really looking at it. It doesn't matter what it's worth now. It matters what it's going to be worth in 20 years. So the fact that it's gone up in a short period of time, unless you're intending on selling it, it's not really relevant. The real key with inflation is that inflation tends to, if you look at historically, cause rental rates to continue to soar. And the increase in rental rates is one of the most noticeable effects of inflation. Okay? Again, the increase in rental rates is actually one of the most notable effects of inflation, which is very, very good for property investors. Andrew Holmes has got a big group in Florida now that's buying in Florida. We'll see how that goes. I don't think they've ever been involved in new construction before, so hopefully that works out well. But the reality is that market's doing well, and I think it's a very strong move for purposes of buying during inflation because we know rental rates are going to continue to increase. And it's because of the high cost that generally comes with mortgages. Most people tend to opt to rent rather than buy. Again, interest rates are still low, but as interest rates increase, which inevitably they have to, right? They're never going to be as low as they are right now. Then that's going to make the rental market even more bullish. So that high demand for rental properties and the influx of tenants will continue to prompt landlords to raise rental rates and have the right and option, and market conditions will enable your ability to raise those rental rates. So needless to say, owning a rental property in this economic climate places you in an ideal position as tenants are more willing to pay higher rents than take on a mortgage as interest rates increase. Start looking for and analyzing the best properties for you. If it cash flows now, it's going to cash flow later. So what does this all mean for people who currently own investment properties? How do you profit from inflation as a real estate investor? Again, what I mentioned before is inflation isn't good for real estate per se, but it offers you some decent opportunities that make real estate investing an ideal asset during inflation. What's one reason? Appreciation of the asset generally offsets inflation. So the appreciation of the real estate asset generally offsets appreciation. It's a highly effective hedge against raising prices. The appreciation rate of the United States real estate has been considerably higher than inflation over a decade now, okay, for the last 10 years. The appreciation of U.S. real estate over the last decade has been considerably higher than the inflation rate. And it may not, this specific approach might not be capable of yielding high returns when if prices continue to spike. It definitely protects your investment and your net worth from devaluing as a result of inflation. Because again, inflation causes currency to have less value because you have to spend more money to get the same amount. So it's in that regard, it's a nice hedge. Rental properties also obviously can generate high returns. They're without a doubt the most profitable asset during inflation. Without a doubt, they're the most profitable. As more people steer away from loans, as we see in 2022, interest rates beginning to rise, more people will be flocking to do traditional rental properties. And then, of course, real estate investors will be able to capitalize on that trend by charging more for rent. More people, more demand, same amount of product, higher rents. The low vacancy rates will generate a very high return on investments for landlords. So more importantly, I guess, investors who have a fixed rate mortgage. So if you're not a cash investor, but you have a fixed rate mortgage, you can put this high income towards servicing their debt in a quick and efficient manner. So some people call it the BRRRR strategy. Some people call it 257. But that's various different ways. Few other ways to profit from the housing market when prices rise. Well, most versatile real estate investors know buying an investment property is not the only way to profit during inflation. You could also look into investing in real estate investment trusts. Those are REITs. We represent some REITs, big, large funds. So you pension funds invest in REITs, but you can invest your money into individual REITs. That helps spread your risk. You can join a real estate crowdfunding platform. So we represent Fund That Flip, which is a national crowdfunder that lends money to real estate investors, and you can get a preferred rate of return. I'm not encouraging you to invest in these specific things. I'm just giving you other ways to diversify and invest. You can invest in a private equity fund that specializes in real estate investments. You can invest in a mutual fund that focuses on the housing market. So all of those things are more passive to still hedge when in the housing market when prices continue to increase. So what's the bottom line? Given the ongoing economic situation, continued inflation bordering on hyperinflation, given COVID, given the pandemic, given the governmental programs that have been put out, and all of this obscene amount of spending that the government is doing, that most of which is being pissed away. And since I'm the speaker, I get to give certain political opinions. The return of inflation and the continued inflation seems to be inevitable. So understanding the mechanisms of this phenomenon is going to be necessary for navigating the real estate market that's going to continue to see the effect of rising prices. Nutshell, great hedge. If you're buying a real estate investment and you're underwriting and it's a cash flowing property, don't worry about Gary Davidson and Ryan Smith being negative nillies about a 20% market correction, because cash flow is cash flow. So the value of the asset is going to protect you against inflation, but the cash flow is going to continue to come in anyway. So what if it goes down? If it goes down 20% in value, as long as you can underwrite it and you can cash flow it, it's good. Flips, just be a little bit careful, because again, if Gary's right, and I don't have a crystal ball, but if I'm right and we do have a market correction because interest rates go up and we have more product because we know that there's millions of properties in the pipeline in foreclosure that are going to be coming through the pipeline in the next 12 to 24 months. More product means lower prices, right? The reason that the hottest toy during Christmas is so expensive is because everybody wants it. When you go in July and there's 10,000 of them on the shelf at Walmart, that's when the sale's going on. So we got to be a little bit careful with flips if I'm right, because the prices now may be different than the prices in July of 2022. So it is 7 o'clock. I spoke for 30 minutes. I'm looking here to see if Brian is still here. So I'm just going to spend just one minute, and then I'm going to have Brian talk about evictions. Obviously, the courts are now open, and Brian's going to talk about Cook County landlord-tenant ordinance. He's going to talk about evictions and answer any questions for you. But again, Castle Law is a full-service law firm. We have attorneys that specialize in specific practice areas. I'm one of the owners of Castle Law. I focus obviously on real estate acquisition, disposition, but we have attorneys that have advanced degrees in taxation. We represent businesses. We represent entities all the way from ExxonMobil down to banks, municipalities. So for any of you that are wholesalers or own rental properties or involved in commercial deals, we certainly can help you. Reach out to me. Phil, if if you wouldn't mind putting in the notes section my contact info, or I can do it. I'll actually put my information here. I can do it myself while Brian's talking. So without further ado, Brian is one of the top eviction attorneys in the Chicagoland area. Brian manages the Castle Law Hoffman Estates office. So we have an office up north as well. And Brian just joined our firm last year and merged with us. So we were glad to bring Brian on and his expertise on representing landlords when the time comes where tenants are not paying or otherwise misbehaving. So Brian Kraus, take a few minutes, maybe 10, to kind of go through what you think is important.
Excellent. Well, Gary, first of all, thank you for introducing me and letting me speak tonight. Just to elaborate a little bit on what Gary said, so I do handle the Castle Law North operation. I've got an office in Hoffman Estates. However, I do want to point out I get all over. I was in Will County for a trial today. I'm in all 6 of the districts for Cook County. Yesterday I was in Markham for the first time in 2 years. They're starting to do some things in person now for court. DuPage, Kane, Will, on occasion I get all the way up to McHenry or Lake County. So I cover evictions all over the state. I echo some of what Gary said. I mean, right now this is a very challenging environment for evictions. Frankly, even before COVID, I don't think things were very good. This is not a very landlord-friendly state. COVID comes along, of course. You've got the moratorium. You've got, and I believe I've talked about this before. I don't know how many of you were here before for my lecture on the Cook County RLTO. I'll touch on that just a little bit. Some of that requires a little more in-depth discussion, though. But there's this perception that the landlord has all the power, and that there's all these slum landlords out there, and there's no protection for tenants. In fact, the opposite is the truth. There are all kinds of laws and regulations, and even beyond that, just the posture of a lot of the judges in these courts. There's a lot of accountability for bad landlords. There's really not a lot of accountability for a bad tenant. Just talking to some clients today, I frequently run into a situation, tenant doesn't pay rent, takes months and months to actually get them out of a property, that they do a lot of damage in the property. You can sue them, you can chase them, but as I tell my clients all the time, I mean, people who aren't paying their rent, you're not going to have a really good chance of recovery, even if you get a money judgment. So it's a challenging environment. Now, I'm talking negative, but I should also point out some of the good things that have happened recently as well. As much as I did not like the moratorium, as much as I think it was the wrong approach to the pandemic, it was unfair, it was commandeering the resources of all these landlords in this state, I do have to say that with the new IDA program, they have done a fairly decent job of kind of compensating landlords for their losses here. Again, I don't agree with the moratorium. I don't like that they're taking taxpayer money to pay for all this. But if you are going to commandeer a landlord's resources and rob them of nearly 2 years of rent, it's only fair that you pay them back. And I have found that a lot of my landlord clients, when they have, on the rare occasion that they have a tenant that's cooperative, they are getting some of that money back in the form of IDA assistance. And those IDA funds, it doesn't go to the tenant, so you don't have to depend on the tenant getting a check and paying you whatever months they haven't paid. That check goes directly to the landlord. Another positive thing I should say about evictions is that they've instituted a lot of good mediation programs pretty much in all the counties. Kendall County, I was in Kendall earlier today as well. They don't have a mediation program out there, but Kane County has it. DuPage, Cook. I've been getting a lot of files off my desk and bringing them to a resolution because I've got pretty good mediators now, and all of that, of course, was a response to COVID as well, because the court dockets in all these counties is just really backed up. So the mediation program, it was meant to alleviate that a little bit. And I think it's worked out to the benefit of the courts, to the benefit of the tenants, and to the benefit of the landlords. So there is some positive news. I don't want to be all negative with it. The most common question I get from folks like you who are investors is, how long is it going to take me to get back into my property? And I hate giving an estimate because things are so up in the air right now, but I can tell you, at least outside of Cook County, the number that I usually give people, as I say, it takes about 2 to 3 months. And that's assuming that the tenant doesn't cooperate with you, that they pull out all the stops and take advantage of all the delays that they can take advantage of in court. So I say about 2 to 3 months. In Cook County, I just can't give people an estimate. And the reason I can't give an estimate in Cook County is the sheriff is so unreliable. Any other county, I tell people it takes the sheriff about 10 to 21 days once an order has been issued to actually throw people out. In Cook County, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 4, 5, 6 months. I've had it every way imaginable, and that was even before COVID. So it's a challenging environment. There's some positive news. I should also say with those estimates too, those are estimates for evictions for non-payment of rent or other lease violations. When you're talking about a situation where an investor buys a property, has squatters in there, has the old owners in there who the bank just decided not to go through with the eviction on, those usually take 2 to 3 months too, unless you've got a bona fide tenant. And then you're looking at having to give them a 90-day notice, having to jump through other hoops, so that could take a little bit longer. With regard to, Gary mentioned the RLTO, the new Cook County RLTO. What's going on with that, and again, I've presented this to you guys before, but just a very brief synopsis on that. This is kind of going along with the theme that there's not enough accountability for landlords. I think the folks on the Cook County board, they had this notion in their head that we got to solve this problem, but so they passed this ordinance that's solving a problem that doesn't really exist, in my opinion. All this ordinance did was make life a whole lot more difficult for landlords and property owners. And what it is, it's basically on the county level. It tries to copy a lot of the onerous provisions of the Chicago RLTO. Some of you might be familiar with some of those provisions, some of the big things. And I could talk about the Cook County and Chicago RLTO for hours, but just to give a quick overview, you got to be really careful about security deposits. They've got to sign a receipt. It's got to be in a certain kind of institution. There are certain disclosures that have to be made in the lease. There are certain things in the lease that cannot be put in there. One of the biggest things that I dislike about the Chicago or the Cook County RLTO now is one of the ways that I help my landlord clients to expedite this process a little bit is I tell them, change your lease so that it says that you can serve a 5-day, 10-day, 30-day, whatever notice So you can serve that either by email or by posting. You don't have to follow the dictates of the statute. Well, the geniuses in Cook County decided, well, let's make things harder for landlords, and let's make it so they can't put those kind of provisions in the lease. So basically, you're stuck with the statute, which means you either got to hand the notice to somebody, or you've got to send it certified mail, or in the rare occasion that they're out of there and they've only left their property, then you can actually post it. So they've decided to make life more difficult. So there's some bad news. It's a challenging environment. There's some good news. Either way, I always tell people, whenever I'm talking with clients, I kind of have this tendency to go off with my displeasure about what the law is, but I always bring myself back and I remind my clients, look, we don't make the laws. Our job is just to navigate them and help you navigate them with the least amount of pain and the least amount of money coming out of your pocket. So I'm happy to help with any such situation. And if I don't know, Gary, if we have a little bit of time here, I am happy to answer questions. I think you're muted, Gary.
Yep, I was unmuting myself. Thanks, BK. So, guys, Brian, I call him BK. BK is an absolute bulldog in court. The biggest component to real estate is minimizing our risk and maximizing our return. So every decision that we make, every opportunity that we analyze has to be done with the two basic components of minimizing risk and maximizing return. So when it comes to evictions and collecting rent, the objective here is to mitigate our risk by serving a 5-day notice immediately. There's no gladly paid Tuesday for a hamburger today. You have to get the notice out right away. We can always slow down the process, but we can't speed it up. So you need to treat tenants just like you're their children. If they get out of line, you got to smack them into place, not literally. But we have to get them in line because they're just going to the following month pay 10 days late, 20 days late. So calibrating expectations on the front end. This is business. It's not personal. We have to run everything like a corporation. And Brian is going to put you in a position to get that asset back, get that cash flowing. If you think something's going to get better, it's not going to. So we have to jump on this, and otherwise you're going to find yourself 2, 3, 4 months behind, and then, the process is the process. We have to file a 5-day, we have to serve them in court, it's another 2 weeks, et cetera, et cetera. Brian's got ways to make that go as fast as possible, but fast as possible in the Cook County court system. So they're fast as you and I define it, and fast as defined by the government bureaucrats in Cook County are two totally separate kettles of fish. So with all that being said, it's 7:15. We got about 15 minutes for questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions. If you want, you can put your questions in the chat. I see a couple now. That's probably the easiest. So just add a question to the chat. If I stop, if you don't know how to do that, I'll also ask for questions. So Robin asks if we work with realtors. Yeah, I mean, a core business of mine is working with realtors and having strong business relationships with realtors and sharing business. My why when I wake up in the morning is to serve others. I'm motivated by helping people grow and scale their businesses. So in addition to servicing realtors' clients, I like to focus on helping them grow their business and grow their portfolios. So yeah, we work with realtors all the time. We can recommend real estate agents to you. Obviously, Frank is a very close personal friend. He works and has close personal relationships with a lot of banks and funds, and the top guy that's the big buyer of the Cook County Sheriff's sale. So Frank's got the in. And of course, in our business and in real estate, having that inside edge having that inside angle is extremely important. Relationships. If Ryan Smith, he represents the banks, he has to take highest and best. But I guarantee you that if he sees a property with my name on it, he's going to tell the asset manager, hey, I know this is going to close because it's with my buddy Gary, and we work together all the time. So those are the advantages that happen. Any other 5-day notice? Eric, you want to know about a 5-day notice? If you send us a email, I can give you a 5-day notice. Let's just spend a minute talking about 5-day notices. Brian, feel free to supplement. Close counts and horseshoes and hand grenades doesn't count when it comes to evictions. So the Illinois statute is very clear. You have to serve a 5-day notice very specifically. It has to be served by someone above the age of 13 that lives at the premises, or the person who's on the lease. And that 5-day notice has to have specific language. You just saying, hey, you owe me $100 and giving it to them isn't going to work. It has to have a specific statutory language. My recommendation with the service of 5-day notice, 5-day notice is only for non-payment of rent, violation of another lease term, such as, drug use, or, not maintaining the property properly, or having loud parties, or smoking marijuana, or whatever other thing they might be violating, is a 10-day notice. The 5-day notice has to have very specific language, and it really should be served by, in my opinion, a private process server, off-duty police officer, because here's why. It's just like for those of you who have children, if I tell my kid to go up and pick their room, there's a 25% chance that they're going to do it. If you tell my child to pick up their room, they're going to take it much more seriously. So having a third party, off-duty officer with a gun on his hip serving the 5-day notice just goes a lot longer and shows your seriousness. It's not that expensive, usually maybe $100, $150, and it will there will be a massively higher chance that person will pay their rent. Brian, anything else on notices, 5-day notices?
No, you covered it really good. I would just clarify, just so everybody understands. You can serve it on anybody who's living at the household who's 13 and older. It can be served, at least the 5-day notice itself can be served by anybody who's 18 or older. Don't get that confused with the summons, because I know a lot of my clients think, well, wait a minute, doesn't the summons have to be served by a sheriff or a process server? Yes, a 5-day notice does. The preliminary notices, 30-day, 5-day, 10-day, they don't have to be served by a process server. But I do agree with a lot of what you said about if you're willing to pay the costs, which aren't that much, sometimes it is better to get hire a process server, or, like you said, an off-duty officer. But anybody older than 18 can serve it.
The other thing with, Brian, I don't know if you've had trouble in court. If you have a third-party private process server serve the 5-day notice, it's much less likely that the service of the notice will be stricken when the landlord serves it and the tenant comes in and says, I never received this. If a third party serves it, that's probably going to have a lot more credibility to a court.
Well, I mean, yes, yeah, that's correct. But I will tell you this, though. In my experience, unless the tenant has, the only time I've seen a 5-day notice service brought into question is if they're, for instance, somebody was out of town, they can prove they were out of town, and the plaintiff's coming in saying, hey, I served them on December 5th. And like, oh, yeah, well, here, look, I was in Florida on December 5th. And then the court's like, oh, okay. Usually, though, whether it's the third party or whether it's the party itself, if you sign that affidavit, a court's usually going to accept it.
Okay, great. There's another question. Michelle's a first-time landlord, and the tenant started paying her partial rent. Do I have to send a certified letter for this?
Here's what I would say to that. You're allowed to do service by certified letters. It's one of the authorized means. But the post office takes forever to get those things served. And the problem is if they don't sign for the card, which half of them don't, then it's no good. So I get why people want to do that, because some people, A, they don't want to have to hire a process server. B, a lot of times they don't want to hand the letter themselves or have someone else do it. So it seems like a good option. Like, I'll just send a certified letter, but if they don't sign it, it's no good. I find people waste time with the certified letter. The best, in my opinion, having done this 10 plus years, the best thing is to either serve it or, like you said, Gary, hire that process server and just get it done.
Hey, Brian, what about collecting partial rent after the expiration of the 5 days?
I recommend that people don't do it. You technically, under the law, you can do it. If you have them sign off on something that says that they understand that you're not waiving the eviction process and you're not reestablishing the tenancy, you'll probably be better off in court. The problem is if you do that, they're probably not going to pay you the money, number one. But if you accept partial rent and you go into court, the court can interpret that as a reestablishment of the tenancy, or at very least, the court can exercise its, quote, equitable power to say, hey, we think that this tenant was confused and thought you were going to keep working with them. So they'll throw your whole case out. And I'd say I've won 99% of these cases. They're not hard cases to win. The few times I've lost, it's because of this foolishness with 5-day notices or accepting rent after you've served the 5-day notice. I know it's hard to turn rent away, especially when you realize that you probably never collected, even if you get a judgment. But I would recommend to people, if you want them out and you don't want your case dismissed, don't accept the rent after you've served the 5-day notice and after those 5 days have expired. You're just jeopardizing your case.
Okay, a couple more questions. 5-day notice for back rent. What notice do you need? Okay, I think they're just making a statement. 5-day notice is for back rent. What notice do you need to end a lease that is expiring that you wish to not renew? So on that, and Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but there is no notice that's required if a lease is expiring and you don't intend to renew it, because the lease expires by operation of law unless it renews automatically. So you have to look at that lease and see what the holdover provision of the lease says. But generally, I would say that a landlord doesn't have to serve any notice to a tenant after a lease is expired prior to filing an eviction if they hold over. Brian, am I right on that or wrong?
I hate to be a contrarian, Gary, because you've gotten so much right, and I appreciate that. On this one issue, yeah, and this may have changed since you were doing a lot more of these, but basically, for a written lease, what you have to do is you have to give a 60-day non-renewal, and that is a pain because a lot of people don't know that. I get a lot of people who think that a lot of people think it's only 30 days. You got to give the 60-day. But here's the thing. Once the lease does expire, though, the law is then that it becomes a month-to-month. So then you only have to give a 30-day notice. So you do have to give a notice, unfortunately. And in order to have the basis to file your suit, you will have had to have provided that notice.
Let me ask you this, Brian. We could talk about this offline, but could you put in a lease agreement that the tenant is aware? Because it seems nonsensical to me, but obviously you're right. Like, if I say that the lease expires on January 1st and it says it in the lease, then I don't know why I would have to give them additional notice, because we've already agreed that your lease expires January 1st. Could I put in my lease that says the tenant is placed on notice that this lease expires on January 1st and they waive any right to further notice and that they have to be out at the date that we've agreed on, or you follow me on what I'm saying?
That's a very good question. I think what you're asking is, can the landlord and tenant agree to waive any such notice?
Yeah.
And for residential purposes, the answer is no. And
Okay.
if we're talking Chicago, specifically Chicago, not only is it no, I should elaborate on this a little bit. Per the new rules in Chicago that were instituted just a year ago, you have to give if a lease is coming to an end, if the party has lived there for more than 3 years, I believe it is. I'd have to double check. But if it's for more than 3 years, you have to give a 120-day notice. So there's no waiver of that. It's just for anybody, I don't know if anybody followed the news on this, but when this was passed about a year ago, Mayor Lightfoot came on and said, well, 60 days is not enough time for a party to move. But what makes it so onerous is it's not just applying to written leases. Even month-to-month leases, if you've had someone who's lived in your property month-to-month for many years, which you'll find leases like that. There are folks who have leases like that are just month-to-month that go on for years and years. You still have to give them a 120-day notice. So it's kind of crazy. But to answer your question, no, you can't waive that. Can commercial folks do that? I'd have to look into whether or not commercial. I do a lot of commercial too, but I don't know off the top of my head if the commercial people can do that,
That's
but not
interesting.
residential.
People get frustrated with me sometimes because they'll call me and I always refer them to other attorneys in the law firm. But it's really kind of the advantage of creating what we've created over here, Brian, because it's kind of like a doctor's office. If you have a problem with your heart, you don't go see the podiatrist or the dermatologist. So when people call me about landlord-tenant issues, I mean, I was doing eviction court 20 years ago, but things have changed so dramatically. So it always amazes me that people, there's people that are immigration attorneys that the next thing you know, they're real estate attorneys or divorce attorneys or DUI lawyers. And the value that I think that what we've created here is we've got 15 or 16 very sophisticated attorneys that focus on very, very specific practice areas. And that's all you focus your attention on. So, even somebody like me, I got that wrong. Brian, you do all your evictions, you do a flat fee, correct? There was a question on how do you get paid as an eviction attorney?
Sure, yeah. These are flat fee. We try to keep them flat fee. Very rare situations where we have to go hourly, jury trials, that sort of thing. My goal is to get people in and out cheaply, quickly as possible with as little pain. But yeah, we do a flat fee. Flat fee plus costs. Court costs, that is. Yeah.
How can you avoid, this is a good question, how do we avoid accepting partial payments of rent if the tenants pay via Zelle or PayPal or direct deposit?
Oh, that's such a good question. And here's the problem. If you don't send it back right away, I had a terrible case in Will County where we lost on this basis. My client didn't even know he'd been paid. And he was paid out of like a $1,500 rent. He was paid maybe $300. There was all kinds of back rent owed. We had this agreement worked out. He sneaks in a $300 payment. His attorney comes in and says, Judge, tenancy was reinstated. They accepted $300. Judge asked me, well, counsel, did he accept the money? I'm like, Judge, he didn't even know he got the money. I actually think she was wrong a little bit on the case law, but she threw the whole case out. So the answer is, to answer your question, other than closing the account or sending it back right away, that's the only way to avoid that.
All right. And I don't see any other questions. Eric, I just sent the message for kind of talking about fees. I would just call Brian directly because it's going to be based on where the case is and everything else. So if you just call Brian directly or send him an email, he can talk to you about that. Richard, I didn't understand your comment here. I don't know if you just want to unmute yourself and ask it. Residential lease ending is an eligible. Tenant has been in unit for 3 years condo. Oh, you were just supplementing your 5-day notices for back rent. What notice do you need to end a lease? Okay, we already answered that.
Hi, Brian. How much is that fee that you mentioned, your fee or fixed fee?
You know what? If you could call me directly about that, it's going to depend, as Gary said, on what county it's in and everything else.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions. Give me a ring. Gary provided one. There's actually two numbers. Gary provided one. You can also get me. I put my number in the chat as well. I can put it again if you'd like.
Okay, one more question. I buy 2-3 flat for my investor a lot, and they have a month-to-month tenant. So what is the legal situation of those month-to-month after the lease is expired? So they are staying there for no reason, right?
Well, if it's at the end of a lease term, it becomes month to month. If you want to get rid of them, you give them a 30-day notice before the first day of the following month. Let it run 30 days, and then if they're not out, you file your eviction.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Phil, I'll turn it back over to you unless anybody has any last minute questions.
Yes, thank you so much for today. I believe we don't have any questions. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to support@ChicagoDealVault.com, or you can send a text message to us, 312-765-7733. We'll be reaching out to Gary or Brian, or instead you can directly reach out to them through the contact details that they have provided. So Gary, you're always one of our best resource. Thank you for your insights and ideas about real estate and the impact of pandemic to this business. So we definitely have learned a lot about the inflation and other factors, as well as how it affects real estate. This way, we better understood about what is happening around us in the business we are in. So thanks also to Brian Cross for adding more information tonight about the landlords and its relation to tenants, laws and regulations that we need to know, especially to new landlords here. So on behalf of Hugo and Chicago Deal Vault, I really enjoyed the meeting today and the webinar. I want to say a huge thank you to both of you, and as well as with our attendees for staying with us for this whole 1 hour of webinar. So yeah, by the way, if you don't have access yet for Chicago Deal Vault, allow me to share at least 1 minute of your time to get to know about Chicago Deal Vault. So here in Chicago Deal Vault, we're giving you a 30-day free trial access. So this is what the access would look like. This is your portal. We provide you with leads from MLS, off-market, that we categorize to probate, pre-foreclosure, upcoming auctions, bank-owned, vacant properties, and the rest. So aside from that, we provide you a list of private lenders, cash buyers, trainings, preferred partners, and a lot more. So this is how the properties would look like. You'll be able to see here a lot of the details of the property, especially with the computations that the system is able to provide you. We provide you MLS properties, and as well as with this information on MLS properties. So yeah, if you're interested to get to know more about the Chicago Deal Vault and the leads that we are providing, we offer you free training that is via webinar, one-on-one with our trainer. Feel free to get access to Chicago Deal Vault by the link that is provided in the chat. So yeah, that's all. Thank you so much again, Gary and Brian, for attending, and everyone for this webinar. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.